When you hear the name Mapplethorpe, it may be this man who comes to mind. Robert Mapplethorpe, a photographer who took pictures like these, made headlines with these, and stirred controversy with images, some pornographic, that we can't show you. But you've probably never heard of this Mapplethorpe, Robert's younger brother, photographer Edward Mapplethorpe.
Bam. Good girl. I have no interest in being a baby photographer.
Right.
Yeah. Look. Oh.
But Edward does take baby pictures. Hundreds of them, in fact. And full disclosure, that's my little girl hamming it up for the camera. This is just one part of an extensive range of Edward's work that has had very little exposure. And that has much to do with sibling rivalry.
We grew up in a very suburban middle-class neighborhood in Floral Park, Queens. We had a great childhood.
Stay right there. Lift your head up a little bit.
In the 1980s, Robert Mapplethorpe became a prominent figure in a New York City subculture of artists and performers. A recently released HBO documentary called Look at the Pictures tells the story of his life through the eyes of those who knew him best, including Edward, who grew up idolizing his mysterious and exciting older brother.
I can really say that I was probably his earliest fan because he would come home, I would almost get nervous, a nervous feeling in my stomach and wanting to sort of impress him and talk to him.
Even at that age, you knew something special. When you behold something
I knew there was something special about him, but I also knew that there was something within myself that was being sparked, you know, a creative side.
A spark that sent budding photographer Edward to New York City after graduating college in 1981. With a little push from their mother, Robert gave his brother a job. Edward worked for Robert for 2 years, but never stopped taking his own pictures. And that's when things started to go wrong.
He never took an interest in what I was doing.
Never said, "This is great work. This is great, Edward."
No.
When their names appeared together on a program for a photography exhibit, Robert drew the line, telling Edward the world had room for only one Mapplethorpe.
That was one of the worst days of my life. We had lunch and he was very angry and he made it quite clear that he wasn't going to be any sort of path to any sort of successful career for me, and strongly suggested that I consider changing my name. I thought he had a point. I always wanted to do it on my own. So I was like, okay, why not?
And that's how Edward Mapplethorpe disappeared from the art world. Taking his mother's maiden name, he became known professionally as Edward Maxey for the next 20 years. It was the beginning of a downward spiral.
I was living out in the West Coast in California, and that's when the drugs started taking hold. And then shortly after that, I heard that Robert was HIV positive.
Despite the hardship and the hard feelings, Edward returned to New York to care for Robert as he died. And that's when he hit rock bottom.
I went to my doctors in tears and told him that I had no control over my drug use and, you know, my life would either end or end up in jail.
Robert died of AIDS in 1989. That same year, Edward kicked his drug habit. Later, he would take back what was rightfully his, the name Mapplethorpe.
You know, there are a number of pivotal points in one's life, and I can point them out when you realize that you have the strength of character to do what you need to do to make your life better.
And life did get better. In 1997, Edward met and later married art curator Michelle Yun. And at age 54, he became a father. With a new outlook on life, he returned to the darkroom.
When I heard it was Edward Mapplethorpe, I was like, Edward Mapplethorpe.
New York City gallery owner Michael Foley has shown Edward's work twice.
The work that I showed was purely abstract. In fact, it really didn't involve a camera at all, and it was all created in the darkroom.
Using only chemicals, light, and paint, he began to find his creative foothold.
It is the ability to go beyond what he thinks is expected of him in photography and what's expected of photography in general. And to go beyond that, for him, I think is really what sets him apart photographically, not only from Robert, but other more traditional historic photographers.
Vivian, if you look right here, that'd be great.
All the while, Edward never stopped taking these photos. Charging thousands of dollars per portrait, it's the kind of work that pays the bills.
As the years went on, I just became so enamored by it, and it's become one of the most rewarding things that I do in my career right now.
And that's why these giggling, drooling, tear-streaked, no-nonsense, dubious little faces are the subject of Edward's first book, called One. With a recent book tour and a larger-than-life display in the windows of posh New York City department store Bergdorf Goodman, Edward is experiencing his most public success to date.
It's almost like if you had been living and working under the shadow of Robert Mapplethorpe, you somehow now are living and working kind of in the light of it. It's shifted.
It has shifted. I certainly don't have the name and recognition that my brother does and leaving the legacy, but not everyone has to be a star. As long as you can continue to do good work and live life as a creative individual, for me anyway, that's okay.